Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Talking the Red. This is Wes, and today we are going to be discussing the Savage version of Eden's Gate Descent. You guys know it as Voidwalker or E2S. Now, this is probably one of the hardest fights for Party Finder groups, largely due to the DPS check. So we'll take a look at it, kind of go over a little bit of the fight from the Red Mage perspective. This was probably one of my better runs as far as numbers go. However, we did have quite a few new players that had never cleared this before, and obviously I made a few mistakes here and there too. Hopefully we can take a look and learn from all of them and give you guys a good idea of what this fight looks like. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. So we go ahead and jump into our countdown. This group was very friendly for Red Mage DPS. As you can see, we've got a Dragoon, a Machinist, and a Dancer. It's very easy to line up our Emboldened buffs all together here. So as we get started, I go ahead and use my first potion right after my first dual cast. I find that's probably the best place to use it so it doesn't clip into the rest of your global cooldowns with its animation there. And then of course I have the Northwest Cleaver spot. So pretty easy for me to get up there and out of the way, but it does cause some problems whenever I'm trying to run back to positions a little bit later. Now, as you can see, I lined up my Emboldened with the Tactical Finish and Battle Litany from the Dragoon there, which definitely helps out quite a bit. Now, the Guillotine is probably one of the trickier things I've noticed for a lot of Party Finder groups. A lot of people don't notice that the spot that I'm standing there, just right there on the corner, is a safe spot. A lot of those ads actually don't start popping you with their debuff until they move out of his little circle range there. So feel free to get underneath him there, and you should be pretty safe as long as you're there on one of the circle corners. Beyond that, this fight is really just all about managing the same mechanics in different orders. There we go with our bleed stack there. I've noticed a lot of groups are rushing it quite a bit, and that tends to be one of the biggest reasons that people wipe, is they're trying to think of the mechanics and the order, which is, to be fair, very difficult. There's a lot going on, and it's all a little bit different from each other. But really, the easiest way to handle this fight is to kind of slow down. With the spell and waiting, you can kind of take things as they come, to be completely honest, without really having to worry too much about rushing out of position or anything like that. Just take your time, take a breath, and don't worry too much. The quietest phase is at the very end. Here we go. I've got a Hellwind, and our Dancer did get popped with a stone there. But definitely during the quietest phase, it does get a little hectic. But again, take your time, slow down. Now, as far as that stone goes, that is a pretty tricky part. With Hellwind, if you do get popped as a Red Mage, it can be kind of tricky to keep in mind the Hellwind, getting out of the position so you're not popped by the stack AoE, and avoiding the eyes. I don't blame the Dancer too much, because I have definitely done that quite a few times myself. But again, it's one of those things, it's just a matter of just kind of taking a moment to look around. So I can get out of the way of the hand there and get off to the sides there for the Guillotine. And get back to my my safe corner right there. And in for the Slicer. Now the Slicer on this, the donut, is a fairly small donut compared to most of them in the game, so you really have to make sure to get underneath him. I've early on tried to core and hope that was the right position, but the core actually puts you still a little bit outside the donut, so you got to make sure to get inside a little bit faster. With the cleavers, one thing that I've noticed that's helped me out quite a bit is that they're actually pretty thin lines when you're standing up that close, so you actually have a little bit of room to try and make some space for your buddies to run out. Feel free to try and get a little bit closer to your party members there, and you can actually clear out quite a bit of space to try and make some room. It's not as important in this part of the fight, but especially later once you get to the quietest phases, it can make a very big difference on getting out for the Guillotine in time. The north-south, though they have a lot of trouble sometimes trying to get out of the way of the Guillotine if you don't make enough space on the sides for them to run out. Here we go, and get into my melee combo here for the first flares, and then out of the way for Hellwind. I did notice, one of our healers was having some issues here. We had them go down a couple of times. Early in the fight is not too big of a deal, and if anyone is going to go down early in the fight, having a healer or a tank do it is definitely preferred to a DPS just because of how hard the DPS check is. But later on, it can be life or death and a clear or a 2-3% wipe. And go ahead and line up our Embolden there. As you can see, we're going to have the tactical finish come up here in a second, as well as the Dragoon jumping. So again, this is a very red mage friendly fight. Definitely helps out with the raid DPS numbers there when they can really take advantage if you're Emboldened. One thing you'll notice me using quite a bit that I didn't use as much in my previous videos is Addle. I've noticed quite a few other Savage Raiders, I think it was MTQ's videos I was watching where they were using it quite a bit on Leviathan, and it's something I've kind of taken to heart. I don't really know if it's helping out a whole lot, but anything that can make it easier on the healers can help you out quite a bit there. Alright, and get out for the guillotine again, and get back inside. So here we're going to get started pretty soon on the fake flares. This is another thing that you didn't see me use a whole lot with the past videos, but Shorecast. Shorecast definitely works on a lot of these Savage raids, so it wouldn't hurt to get rid of stuff that you're not using as much off of your hotbars for these fights, and put in Shorecast or Addle in its place, help out the raid a little bit. I'm not going to be using... Hopefully I'm not going to be using like the Limit Break or even my Vercure all that much except for emergency, so there's really no reason to have them on my main keybinds there. Alright, so go ahead and we're going to start getting into position. Now this group did things a little bit weird. The most common strategy is to have the DPS, they would normally stack on C right there with the rest of the group. For whatever reason we decided to have the DPS stack kind of over in the corner. As you can also see, our tank went down in this point, so I have to get a Veraze off there, but it does, lose me a global cooldown there, which does affect the DPS a little bit. And there I ended up wasting one of my my dual casts just in the confusion of trying to Veraze and all of that. Alright, and Core back into position and get ready for the Embolden right there. And at this point, you have just... plenty of time to just sit in DPS for a little bit. Those that second round of flares is something like a 45-second spell and waiting cast. So, yeah, go ahead and use your Limit Break 3 at that point. If everyone's doing fine on DPS, it should be up. And just go ham for a little bit. You've got more than enough time to move out of the way here. And another time to just kind of be mindful of the eyes. This one's a little bit more obvious than whenever you have the puddle stacks. But it can be easy to forget in the midst of everything. Okay, so go ahead and get another spell in waiting there. There's also, I think it was at this point here that I used my monification a little bit late. I think I had something like 65 or 70 mana. I definitely could have used it a little bit earlier there. Would have helped out quite a bit on getting maybe even another melee combo in, especially at the end of the fight. Get my buddies. And as you can see, running literally corner to corner. Definitely caused a little bit of a rush there, trying to get back into position. I usually prefer having one of the south positions as a red mage if I can, but, as a ranged, we have a lot of leeway as far as where we can go. As you can see, my healers were having a lot of trouble there. Barely made it at that position. If I had gone down there, we probably would have wiped on this. For the most part, I was doing pretty good DPS, hovering high 11,000s to 12k, even up to 13 or so in those initial rushes, but especially at the end we had quite a few 0.3, 0.4% wipes, so it was very, very important to try and keep up as much DPS as we can. Thankfully for this run, it was mostly the healers and tanks that had gone down, and again, if anyone's going to go down, that would be preferable at this point of it. So here's where things start getting really tricky. It's one of my only complaints with the fight here is that it is very backloaded. Usually Square is pretty good about making sure that you're not going to have to go through 10 minutes of a fight before you find out you wipe. But a lot of party finder groups I've noticed can be doing great DPS and no deaths or anything like that. But once you get to the quietest phase, if you have too many people go down or get popped with the ads, you can still wipe. So it's 10 minutes all over again. It's one of the more annoying fights because of that. Yeah. So I had used my embolden there and should have had it lined up. But there, as you can see, that safe spot is extremely important for the cycle of chaos. Being able to get in there and get underneath for the slicer is extremely handy. As you can see, we had a couple people go down there, and that was more than likely why. It's one of the faster casts of any of the Savage raids that I've noticed so far. So if you can make some room there and know where your safe spots are, you can absolutely save the raid and make sure that you're going to be doing enough DPS through this point to finish it. I think the overall DPS check for this is something like 71k. So it's pretty tight for a lot of party finder groups. Now statics aren't going to have nearly that trouble, and obviously gear is going to make it a little bit easier as the fights as the weeks go on and more people get accustomed to the fight. I think there are even statics that are even able to completely skip the quietest phase. They're pulling something like 88k DPS, and that's more than enough to, if not skip it completely, at least only have to deal with a couple of the mechanics here instead of the entire phase. And here we go ahead, and at this point it's just pumping out as much DPS as you can, and that's essentially the fight. Like I said, it's very tricky for party finder groups. I wanted to do a Leviathan video instead, but at least on the Crystal Data Center, it's very hard to find a lot of decent Leviathan groups just because this is such a brick wall for party finder groups. It is a very, very tight fight to deal with. But there you have it. Like I said, a few mistakes, but overall pretty happy with it. One of the closer groups that I've had as far as getting close to the enraged there, but you know, a clear's a clear. That's ultimately all that matters. Hopefully this next week I can get a Leviathan Savage group up so you guys can kind of see what that's like from a Red Mage perspective. It's very fun. It is a little bit trickier than Descent because of all the movement that's involved, but again, a very, very fun fight. And honestly, if you can get through E2S, E3 is I would say a little bit easier mechanics wise. So I'll leave you with that little bit of hope right there. If you guys have any other strategies or comments about Red Mage play or E2S in particular, feel free to leave them in the comments. Once again though, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.